Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Intelligent Data and Experienced CROs, Unleashing the Power of Collaboration, presented by H1 and ProPharma and sponsored by Fierce Biotech. I'm Michelle Benz, Content Director here at Fierce Biotech, and I'll be moderating this webinar. I'd like to start off by introducing today's speakers. We have Rob Consalvo, Director of Strategic Commercial Engagement at H1, Brian Katz, Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Corporate Development at ProPharma Group, and Kim Futch, Director of Operational Strategy at ProPharma Group. You can read their full bios on the left side of your screen by selecting the Speakers tab. Now, just a few notes before we begin. To access the additional resources for today's presentation, please click the Handouts tab button on the left side of your screen. You can also access closed captions from the bottom corner of the video player. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch within 24 hours. We'd love to hear from you. During the presentation, please submit any questions you have using the Question and Answers tab on the left side of your screen. We'll end our session with those live Q&As. Now, before we begin, I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves. So, Robert, would you like to start?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Rob Consalvo. I sit in London, as everyone online can probably tell from my rich English accent, and I sit across our commercial organization at H1, getting to have a lot of really interesting conversations with folks around strategy, AI, how they use data, all those sorts of things. And I'm really excited to be here. And I'll kick it back.
Great, thank you. Brian?
My role is really to really help our organization really try to partner with interesting technologies, like many of which we'll hear about today. But more importantly, really, how do we fully embrace our RCO model by leveraging technology-enabled consulting to its fullest? And so hopefully we'll be talking a little bit more about that today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Kim?
Great. I'm Kim Futch. Pleasure to be here today. I have 22 years of drug development experience, ranging from large pharma, biotechs, and various size CROs. My background includes project and program management, operational execution, client relationship management, and strategy planning. So for me, it's really exciting to have the opportunity to work with H1 and using the AI applicabilities into how we help to better inform our clinical trials for better efficiencies. So very excited about the opportunity to be here today. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Let's begin. So we have our first question. Let's define what all of this means in the context of clinical research today. AI, NLP, machine learning. What do those mean in the landscape of trials, and how do we design tech that puts it in the hands of the most critical stakeholders? Brian, let's start with you.
Oh, certainly. So really, if we wanted to frame out, natural language processing is really interesting because now we're able to really access data and can leverage it in a way that really translates its content into vectors, right? Which means taking all this disparate data that might exist within the world, being able to turn it into ones and zeros, and then really turn it into, again, a means to really search and query that data using natural language programming, right? And then generate natural language based on all those ones and zeros. And so it's a very exciting time to really start thinking and embracing natural language processing and machine learning and AI more broadly in our industry. It really came about over the last 6 months. It's really come alive, really, now that we have an increased commercial availability of large language models and vector databases, which are now more commercial than ever. So the vector databases, for those that are listening in, it's really whenever you're trying to take large and access data from large sources, what you really need to do is turn it into numbers, ones and zeros. For a little bit more complicated than that, but at the same time, what these vector databases have now enabled is a smarter way to query all of that data. And now these are commercially available to us. That wasn't the case, 6 to 9 months ago. So now all of a sudden, within the last year, we've really been able to create and democratize toolkits that people like me can use, right? That have really limited technical capability, but really meaningfully, surface insights from large databases. So things that are happening with this technology, just as an example, synthetic controls, right, through the analysis of large amounts of patient data. I mean, you've heard a lot about that in the press lately. Data-driven natural history studies that are based on significant amounts of claims data, right? Really understanding and helping innovators understand the disease space more fully, understand treatment patterns, and fine-tune target patient populations. And then also, around the patient populations, really understand what are the most effective endpoints that, should be considered as you are creating a new therapy. So just an interesting, set of developments over the past 9 months that's really putting the power into the hands of researchers.
Great. Rob, did
So
you want
hopefully
to
that
add anything?
No, that was awesome. Brian, I think I like what you said about a lot of these things being very, very new, right? Like when I think about like commercially available vector databases and uh, LLMs and things like that, a lot of the technology isn't particularly new, right? But I would say the application is modern, right? So AI has been around since we've been able to tell a computer uh, do this task, right? For all intents and purposes, but what we're finding now is that we have a considerably better opportunity to leverage the things that do exist, right? So I think, and Brian, you spoke to this very briefly, but this concept of democratizing access to these tools, to these data, right? I think that's really going to be one of the big hallmarks here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think if I was to think about this in terms of getting this into the hands of the most critical stakeholders, right? I would encourage everyone who's listening to consider the patient as a participant, not just a data point, right? So often what we find is that all of the data that is created, because for the work that we're all trying to do, right, that end of patient care, the patient outcome is the end of that process for the most part, right? But what we have the opportunity to do now is actually engage the patient to a much higher degree than ever really before, right? We can see this through mining the technology of wearable tech, right? Mining data that comes out of wearables can be another area that we can start to include those patients in the process of generating that data, becoming the participants, becoming stewards essentially of their own data in the process. And that data stewardship is something that's really critical, especially as we start to talk more about these technologies. But I think if I was to give one thing that I would really hope, right, when we're designing tech, when we're designing trials, and we're putting this into folks' hands, keeping that patient in mind, I think, is going to be one of the most critical aspects.
Thank you. Kim, did you want to add anything?
It's hard to follow that because I think there's really been a great summary there encompassing what does this mean in the context of clinical research today. I think if I have my one takeaway, it's saying the ability to have predictive and analytics as the outcome has been truly paramount to how we look at clinical research these days. I think all those points that Brian and Rob have just shared into how do we find the right patients? Can we do that more efficiently and more effectively? Can we recruit patients in different ways? How do we identify suitable candidates that could be the right fits for these trials? Really makes a huge difference. And I think being able to put that into the hands of stakeholders, maybe I was thinking about that from an operational perspective a little bit differently. But I think the first and foremost piece there is the collaboration that we've been able to have with H1 in saying, how do we actually understand the capabilities of these platforms? And how do we share the expertise of vectors whichever those things mean, zeros and ones, to what Kim Futch does, and that's saying, how do I find a patient that makes the most sense in the right sites to meet these expectations? So I think what this is allowing us to do is, I think Brian alluded to this also, but it's being able to more efficiently really understand patient outcomes. And if we understand those pieces within the access capabilities, we design studies a little bit differently and potentially make them more efficient to say, are they more streamlined? Is it focusing the right areas right now that we have one more added tool to help provide us with directional guidance and evidence of what we might be able to do? So I think, the way that I'm looking at it is it's really streamlined some of our overall clinical trial processes and it's really accelerated drug discovery and improving that efficiency into moving that, that patient unmet medical need, matching it with that new compound that may be available. So I think what it means today is, as Brian, I think, started off with, in the past 6 to 9 months, it's opened up a huge door for us to really explore new opportunities to really reevaluate the way that we look at clinical trial development.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to ask Rob another question about the ethical considerations for using data at scale and the inherent risk that data is biased.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to talk about the concept that we touched on very briefly, just real quick, to kind of set the stage here. So Brian mentioned in his response to the last question, as did I, about the concept of data democratization, right? So for those unaware, the concept of data democratization is basically providing access and usability to data for non-technical individuals, right? There are a lot of things that we have to consider when it comes to data democratization. And a lot of folks on the line might be thinking, oh, well, everyone has access to all of the data that they could need and all of the tools and things like that. But that's unfortunately not the reality of the world that we live in today. We have this challenge called the digital divide in our world, which is essentially the gap between individuals who have access to technology and those that don't. And this is prevalent in particular in low socioeconomic individuals. So when I think about how do we address issues of access in the United States, for example, right? One of the limiting factors of access is digital access, right? Being able to go online, find that doctor that might be doing the clinical trial in the area that you care about, so on, so on, so on, right? If you don't have access to the internet, if you don't have a smartphone in your pocket, there are a lot of things that you're unable to then do, right? So that's an underlying challenge. That's a systemic challenge. But what that means is that those of us that are in positions of authority in this space, like the three of us that are from industry and speaking to you today, we have a responsibility then to act compliantly and ethically with respect to the people that we have data on, right? In my previous answer, I alluded to the fact that putting patients in the driver's seat gives them the opportunity to really own their data, right? This is one of the ways that you can democratize data. You give the participants access to their own information, right? And when I think about overcoming some of the challenges like low diversity completion for clinical trials, right? And improving diversity metrics within those trials, right? I think it's important to consider that if you're looking to improve those outcomes, that your actions have to then reflect the improvement of those outcomes for those patients. And ultimately, that comes back to acting and thinking responsibly when it comes to the people and the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And I'll come off my soapbox there.
Thank you. That was very helpful. So let's go to the next question. Specific to clinical research, how do we maintain data utility with ethical and responsible use? Rob, do you want to kick us off with that a little bit?
Oh, I think...
oh, sorry.
I think we just spoke to this one. But I don't know if there's if Kim, maybe you have some thoughts on this, or Brian, if there's anything that either of you would like to add.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a few areas, and Rob, I loved what you said about focusing on the diversity capabilities. I think that's one area that's helping us to not necessarily reshape, but just again reevaluate things. I think what AI has helped us to do is ensure that we have fair representation in trials. And that's ensuring that there's diverse patient populations that are included and removing some of those unintended biases. I think that you were talking about
Yeah.
in terms of we're not looking to disproportionately impact, one geographic area versus another. But I think that's where some of our ethical responsibility comes into play. And I think how it's reshaping us in terms of overall feasibility is really looking to reshape the way that we think about studies when we're doing that pre-planning piece, and it's understanding site selection, it's understanding patient recruitment hurdles, potential risk assessments that we may have, and the accuracy of our timelines for those projections. Brian and I were just talking about this a couple of minutes ago, but I think if you look at the iron triangle business model of balancing speed, cost, and quality, here we have opportunities for enhancing all of those with the use of AI and NLP. It ranges from, if you think about a faster patient recruitment by better selecting sites, you have a stronger potential for access within shortened periods of timeline, better patients, shorter durations. You've hit that efficiency of cost, shortening timelines, quality by selecting the right ones first, and an overall efficiency in your timelines because you've selected the right ones. So I think the importance of using intelligence for these accesses really help us to do that predictive planning, that we're better informed as we are, and we're better informed today by being able to use some of these tools than we are by maybe traditional models of saying, if we're going to do a feasibility assessment by let's ask the following sites these questions. We can do a lot of that now by using some of these tools, and especially maybe Brian, you want to talk about the ClinChat, opportunities for us. I think that's been a great way for us to really build efficiencies in the way that we plan studies to be more accurate early on.
Brian, did you want to add anything?
No, actually, I think that's a great segue to our next topic.
Sure, it really was. How does AI reshape data utility to help with trial design and feasibility? And I know, Kim, you were just kind of speaking to this, so do you want to continue your thought?
Yeah, I think that's it's reshaping the way that we think about these in terms of those overall predictability analyses, and that's we talked about things like designing your protocol based on certain patient populations. What we do now is we use a lot of different tools. We use publicly available data sets that say what has been done before. What I think the ability that we have now using some of these AI platforms within H1 is to say, here's real world evidence. Here's exactly, as Rob was just mentioning, these are the patients that are being seen at these institutions. We've maintained a level of anonymity of who those patients are. But what we understand is, Dr. Smith at this institution is seeing these types of patients. I think for us, that's really helped to understand who has the patient population that's either being addressed for the current needs or that may have an unmet medical need. And then from that, I think Rob alluded to earlier, is also looking at those patients that, maybe we weren't able to reach before because they don't live, let's say, near a big city that's having those trials being done. We have that reach out now using such things as decentralized trials that say, we're not going to have you actually go into the site. Maybe we can have a home nurse come out to you. And therefore, we're reaching some of these patients that never had that access before. And we didn't maybe know about them until we started to look at the claims data and then put some of that together from an analytical perspective to say, how else can we reach these patients that could be a really good fit who need this treatment? So I think that's a lot of ways that right now we're looking to evolve our trial design opportunities.
Yeah, Rob, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what's interesting to me about trial design, feasibility, and what AI can help to unlock, and Kim, I think you spoke to this beautifully, but I think one of the things that I took away from that was that it really is about the data that goes in, right? So it's like with anything, that whatever you feed it is going to determine whether or not it grows healthy and strong and all of that. And I think what we're also at the point of is data abundance, that we can actually consume things that are really healthy for our AI, right? We can use decentralized clinical trials to generate tons of data from the real world, right? Data that otherwise before, and I kind of alluded to this with wearables, right? Like being able to get access to a massive amount of information that we otherwise wouldn't before. Getting access to CTMS networks, right? Being able to understand what is the real results at a much faster time frame, right? With the actual things that often are fairly well protected and hidden, right? Because those are things that help to create a differentiator, give you speed or better time to market, things like that, right? So what I think we're ultimately reaching this point now is that with the ability to access all of these additional data, and with AI's ability to process that information in such a robust fashion, right? I think that really will help to reshape our design of trials, because we're going to have a lot better understanding of what has worked well, and we can basically prove out some of those things a little bit more easily, I think, today with access. Brian, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add or speak to on that.
Yeah, actually, I have, maybe, another perspective that's a little, I think, more related to our recent launch of ClinChat, that we co-developed with H1. So ClinChat is a conversational bot that sits on top of all of H1's, real world data assets. And, in that, we've created an ability for researchers to rapidly surface insights by vectorizing that data, as I mentioned earlier, in such a way that it can be queried by a large language model, and you could get a very quick response, right? So large language models such as Llama or Falcon, etc. So if we wanted to quickly access or assess country site or patient landscape regarding an indication or modality, we can simply enter a prompt into ClinChat, as opposed to spending hours trying to manually query various public or private databases. And so you can, again, getting back to that iron triangle that Kim introduced, right? I mean, it's a cost quality speed play that is really additive to the overall ability of researchers to get at answers quickly and make more informed decisions. Additionally, right, from a trial design feasibility perspective, we could also see an impact to overall clinical trial execution through the enhanced risk-based monitoring, right? I mean, so, if you've been in the industry as long as I have, it's like risk-based monitoring has been this thing that people have been talking about for decades. However, um, now I think it deserves another chance, and I think it there is a I think an innovation in the machine learning space that's really now kind of given risk-based monitoring a capability to be more effective and more reliable in the way that, we start being able to assess the overall performance of risk across sites, investigators, and patient populations, and then continually learning as a trial is going on, so that you can make course corrections in the middle of a trial to make sure that you're staying on track. So all of these technologies are now available, getting back to that, the topic of it being democratized to you know everybody within a clinical research organization, patients, investigators, and the rest of the stakeholders. So really, I think that that's really a critical, way to start thinking about feasibility of the future.
Kim, did you want to add something?
Well, I did. Now I have a couple of comments, but I think it's, the more that Rob and Brian talk, the more I get excited about some of this. So forgive me for the excitement when it comes around data. But I think Rob made a really great point when he was talking about utilization of CTMS data. I think one thing there that's also been incredibly helpful is this concept of sharing information. Rather than having things siloed, it's still anonymized. It's still not saying exactly who did what, in what study, from which sponsor, from which site. but it's giving you this curated, summarized information ability to say what's happening at institutions across the board. How long is it taking for things to happen? Who's doing what? And I think this effort now that we're saying, let's share and let's learn from each other, has really been hugely insightful for us in terms of what AI can do in terms of pulling that together. So I think that's one fantastic point that's also really been strongly revolutionizing the way that we're looking at trials these days. The other that Brian just mentioned is, being able to use this real world data to look at studies and make real time decisions. For those who work in such the oncology world, adaptive designs have become almost the new norm to say, why do we want to plan something out that we don't know? Let's plan it for our next steps and then understand what we should do and be flexible, that we don't have to have a hard stop at some point in time. And this is where, again, the real world data has really come into play that's created these efficiencies to be able to say, we don't have to do a phase 1 study, end it, and then do a phase 2, stop it, and then do another phase 2. We do a phase 1-2 platform trial that has enabled us to say, if this doesn't work, let's try something else. And let's keep finding out what's been successful and what's helped patients more than anything else. And let's keep that, in a continuous and seamless way, rather than trying to stop things, restart them, and then move forward. So I think those were two excellent points that just really wanted to highlight as really also absolutely reshaping the way that we think about trials.
That was really helpful. Thank you. Anyone else want to add a final comment before we move to the next question?
I do just have one thing to add, because we've talked about it a lot, but I don't think it's come up as much in this topic, and that is around the diversity aspect as it relates to feasibility. So, with the FDA mandate for diversity in clinical trials, right, there is a requirement now to ensure that there is a degree of diversity documented for the trial. So one of the things that I think is going to be really helpful from an AI perspective, and this comes back to the democratization of data and just informing what goes into it, the volumes of data that can go in. But when you have access to diversity data for patients that are being seen by physicians, you can also create a much more holistic approach, right? So when I think about the Hispanic populations in the United States, right? I lived in California before moving to London in a largely Hispanic area. Spanish speaking predominantly was the main thing. And in order to run a successful trial where I lived, you would need to have a physician that could also speak Spanish, right? And you would need to know that that person had patients that spoke Spanish. And basically, all of those things are elements that you could basically pull through, that you can access more easily as a result of AI, or at the very least as a result of the data that can be used by it. But Kim, I know this is something that's relevant for you and close to your heart. Do you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Oh, you couldn't have taken the words out of my mouth any better. It is near and dear to my heart. In the diversity guidance for industry that the FDA has issued really has played a large part into how we help pre-plan studies to ensure that that's captured. But that's not the only reason why we care about diversity. When we start to look at different patient populations, you do see ethnic differences in, let's say, cystic fibrosis, or you do see in heart disease, right? You want to understand who are your right patients that you're targeting, and where are those patients? So I think what we have been using a lot of the diversity capabilities from the H1 platform is just in providing that insight to how do we find those right patients? And as you indicated, it does outline to us who are the Hispanic, individuals that need a Spanish speaking, physician that they're working with. We have actually found a correlation between cultural differences, that they tend to find cultural areas that match that for obvious reasons. But what we want to understand too is if it's not just, if it could be age related. There are diversity pieces to say when we want to look at a clinical trial that's only enrolling patients that are 22 to 37 years old. That's where we're able to figure that out from the claims data, rather than just saying adult patients. that's really helped us in terms of each of those demographic pieces that really provide those additional insights that you may, again, not get from just public information from different trials, but it's what claims data shares with us that really makes that difference to understand what diversity means when you're looking at enrolling patient populations based on, again, how do you look at personalized medicine? And I know I'm using that maybe in terms of an oncology perspective, but I think that diversifies itself into other therapeutic areas that really indicate how do you find the right matches that make the most sense.
Kim, I love that.
So,
And I do have one thing to just add to this, and I'm sorry, I know I'm looking at time here, and I promise I'll keep it brief. But I think that so what you just alluded to also speaks to me from like an SDOH perspective, social determinants of health, right? So what we know is that there's also the challenges if you're financially low socioeconomic status to access clinical trials, right? There are also a whole host of things that come along with that, things like malnutrition, other things that basically are comorbidities there that
education,
you
yep.
could exact education, absolutely huge. So I think what I'm very encouraged by from a design and feasibility perspective as well is being able to account for that and even consider patients that would be otherwise typically more difficult to recruit by making accommodations, right? And knowing from the data and from what you can extrapolate within that data that you may need to account for transportation, right? To or from the site, right? Or it can encourage you to do more from a wearable perspective or a decentralized perspective, right? So I think that's one of the things that I'm also very excited about, not just from the race side of things, but also to your point from the SDOH side as well.
That was great. Thank you. Let's move to our next question. How will partnerships like H1 and ProPharma disrupt traditional clinical trial processes and deliver better outcomes for patients? Brian, do you want to kick us off with this one?
Sure. I think that partnerships like ours, and meaning, H1 from a technology and data company, and ProPharma as a research consulting organization or RCO, have the potential opportunity to really transform the industry in a meaningful way. So, what was once, the domain of a pure play CRO, as an example, is now shared with more nimble and well-funded, AI solution providers like H1 that can partner directly with sponsors to optimize clinical programs. Right. So, if you believe that these new types of companies, like we do, that they offer a disruptive opportunity to enhance sponsor delivery, reduce risk, and improve patient outcomes, then there's value in developing the partnership like we have, built on a shared innovation roadmap that aims to rapidly advance, new solutions that sit at this intersection of strategy and technology. So, from my experience, the shared end goal and vision that we have has been critical to get us to the point we are today with ClinChat. And I mean, we sat at the drawing board in April, and here we are with a launched product, and it's pretty amazing. And we're really excited about starting to use this in earnest on everything. And so from my perspective, the teaming and partnering like this, that are willing to truly collaborate and share ideas with a common vision, are unstoppable, and they will be transformative.
Kim, did you want to add anything?
I, I think I'm going to echo most of Brian's points. The only, I guess, way that I look at this differently is I don't want to say it's going to disrupt processes. I think it's going to enhance them. I think it's really going to make us with improved efficiencies, with higher quality, with better drug delivery. I think these traditional methods that we have aren't going away. They're just being better supported. And again, it's giving us one more avenue that provides opportunities to be more efficient, patient centric, cost effective, mean, putting all these things together, I think Robbie talked about accessibility to trials and to treatments. Right there, it opens these doors that we haven't had before. So, yes, I guess it disrupts tradition, but I'm going to say it enhances future opportunities. Just to clarify from that, but I think it's all I think it's win-wins across the board. It's just one more opportunity for us to look at different ways of thinking and in different ways than we've done in the past.
Better. That was much better said than what I said.
What do you think, Rob?
I like well, I definitely agree, and I am very excited, obviously, about the partnership. ClinChat is it was a Herculean feat, and I'm obviously very proud of everything that both organizations have been able to do for that. I think when it comes to AI, Kim, what you said reminded me of a saying I heard, this is an old adage, but it's there will not be it will not be the difference between uh, people that are successful and people that use this new technology. It'll be there will be people that use this technology effectively and people that don't use this technology effectively, right? Eventually we will have no lawyers that don't use some form of AI, right? Any profession will have some form of AI that's embedded directly into it. And I think that for me, what is really clear kind of going into this is that the better outcomes come from the better inputs. And I think, yes, of course, that's data. Yes, of course, that's technology, but it's also the ideas, right? And I think there's no real way to change the fact that the people that have the ideas that go in to the top of it, the ideas that create the ClinChats, right? That's really what's super exciting to me, right? As a result of these types of partnerships, because really, just like with anything, like those better outcomes come from better inputs. And I think we've got some pretty phenomenal inputs in this partnership at the very least.
And I want to congratulate you all on the launch. It's so exciting. I can't wait to see what you're able to accomplish with this and all the amazing results you're going to have. So let's move to some live Q&A that we have from the audience. So just as a reminder to everyone, feel free to type in your questions on the left-hand side of your screen, and we'll be able to take those. So we do have one question right away I want to start with. So often these wonderful tools are applicable to the high volume use in the pharma or health industry. When will these tools kind of trickle down or become more affordable to medical device clinical research?
Well, I could take that one. I think it's available now. These tools I don't think are necessarily, and I think this is one of the things that Rob and I have been commenting on. It's no more is it the purview of your large CROs or your
Exactly.
high volume providers. I mean, these are tools that are now available to smaller innovators, and that are looking to advance their a therapy or a medicinal product. So this is definitely, these are all game changers. The advancements, as we mentioned earlier, in the last 6 to 9 months have made it so. We wouldn't have been able to pull this together and execute as quickly as we have if it were otherwise.
Anyone else want to comment on that one?
I would just agree, right? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kim.
No, please. The only thing I would add is, I think the capabilities, if we're looking specifically at device, that is one that, I have worked through within ProPharma to understand what we can do to understand, patient identification, site selection, what do claims look like for this? What we struggle with some of our other tools from a data mining perspective is you aren't able to find some things that say, I'm looking for a device that's looking at this specific, I don't know, if it's for a blood transfusion, something that's very specific or very, I guess, closely required for a not a specific indication. What I've been able to find from H1 is we can understand what some device data looks like. It's probably something that's still in stronger evolution over time, but I think that's where that we've had the fantastic collaboration to say, here's an area where we need to understand things a little bit better. What can we do? And Rob, your group has been absolutely phenomenal with taking some of these suggestions that we come with as a wish list and say, here's an unmet need that we are still finding. How can you take this from a a programming perspective, and how do we pull that into life so that it's operationally viable?
And I would just add one thing from the device perspective and from the data perspective. I would say a lot of companies today probably have some of the data that they need to use or to make some of these decisions in a more meaningful way. What I've often found is that the limitation comes on how interconnected the data is, right? Because essentially, if the data doesn't know things about the data, then you can't tell a computer to learn things about the data. So that's just something to consider there to the person who asked the question, right? Think about how your data is already connected. That might be a way for you to just make it easier to use an AI on top of it if you need.
We have another question. What is the recommendation for those who are interested in getting a primer on AI and its application? Are there any training programs?
I think that there are. I mean, some I see, here and there, pop up as I'm kind of perusing Facebook or something like that. But for me, it's really been about a lot of reading, a lot of time with Chat GPT. I'm not above that. To asking what is a vector database. So I think that it's really about time that you need to invest in doing your the research that matters to you, and answer just and start at the basics. I mean, that's kind of way that I continue to crawl my way towards some semblance of knowledge in this space.
Anyone else want to add anything?
I have one piece of advice, and it's the same as if anyone's trying to learn a language, learn the vocabulary, right? It'll help you make sense of the way people talk about it, and you can ask questions a little bit more easily. Like, what's a vector database? Brian, great example of a question to ask for the folks that are getting started with the AI stuff, too, right? I think that's going to be one that comes up right off the bat. So.
We have another good question. How are traditional CROs partnering with H1 and ProPharma? They're not clear how it all ties in, so if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so within ProPharma, one of our divisions focuses on full service and FSP clinical research. And so, the full umbrella of ProPharma is a end-to-end research consulting organization. And and while we're focusing on an asset, obviously, as you develop your asset, some of that's going to be, potentially clinical trial work. Hopefully, if you're on track and you check all the other preclinical boxes, etc. Which ProPharma is positioned to support sponsors with. And so really between an H1 and at least within our partnership, there are no real external CROs that are really needed outside of at least our unique partnership. And I just want to make sure I qualify that, Rob, right? But I do think that is this type of technology is certainly going to be something that I think is going to resonate and is going to be of interest, in the rest of the clinical research industry.
And I would only add to that from the H1 perspective, in partnering with other CROs. We have data platform, we have data offerings, things like that. And then, of course, as you can probably tell, we do some unique bespoke work as well when we're so moved and inclined. But we do partner with providing data, technology, things like that as well with other CROs, just as a par for the course type thing.
Any final thoughts from you three?
I would say, from the most honest thing I could say is find a partner that has a very similar way of thinking about business as you do. When we started our discussion with H1, it was very quickly apparent that we kind of both stared at each other across the table and said, let's do something cool. And that's really how it all started. I very, honest. Yeah, that was, let's have some fun. And, obviously it was doing something cool in the pursuit of something greater. It was doing something cool in the pursuit of really trying to impact patient outcomes and breaking the mold of a 30-year-old traditional model of doing things. So it's been, you got to find that right partner that shares that passion.
Thank you all so much.
Well,
We had some great questions from the audience. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
There
I
seems
just
like
wanted
one
to
more
thank
question,
Brian for
actually.
that as well. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, Brian, because I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the things that we really do pride ourselves on is the fact that we try and be as innovative as possible. We're constantly looking for ways to push ourselves as an organization. And when we get the opportunity to do it with someone, you create beautiful things. So
Yeah.
thank you for saying that,
I
Brian.
think there might be, if we have time, there's one more question I just saw come in.
Yeah, I just saw it as well. How do we transition from traditional CROs to this model? What do the steps look like?
I think it's just picking up the phone and calling Kim or me, right, for the most part. And I think that would be the first step. I think and we could take it from there. It's there's just a way that we've embraced technology, and we're using the term technology enabled consulting across our model uh, to imply that it's not something that we're adding as a separate line item on proposals. It's not something that's a pass through. These are things and investments that we're making that are part of our DNA. It's in the air we breathe. It's part of everything that we do. And so we are creating a different culture here, at ProPharma, and I know that's shared with H1. Uh, so it's not necessarily a straightforward stepwise approach, but I'm sure we'd be happy to speak with you further to help really try to describe it a little further. I don't know if we have enough time to really. I'm at risk of probably going down a rabbit hole or two with the time we have left.
And I think the only thing I would add to that, Brian, is it takes an open mindedness and some flexibility in thinking because we, especially as researchers, we are trained to do things in a certain way. I have been challenged from time to time into some of the results that we get from H1. And I'm saying, really? That doesn't match what my data mining tells me. That doesn't match me what I've seen traditionally. And then when you start going down that actual analytic perspective, then suddenly it seems to say, like, wait a second, maybe that's why. Maybe because the study that I was looking at wasn't my nearest neighbor. Maybe it's because there were these nuances of, I hate to use this as a bad example, but like your pre-pandemic, your during pandemic, your post-pandemic, if that's what we're calling it today, looks like. What does that mean? And what the claims day is able to help us with is say things like, well, look at your 2-year data, look at your 5-year data, look at 10-year data, and see where that comes together. So it's forced me, as we talked about reshaping does lead to some uncomfortability pieces that you're not used to doing it this way. So it takes some of that to say I'm willing to try something new. And I think one of the I guess the best pieces of advice that H1 has given me is this is directional guidance and evidence to help you question more and more. I think for me that has been just the biggest takeaway is it has made me think differently. and not just do the way that I've been doing things for 20 plus years, but say, wait a second, I'm used to this, but let me be a little uncomfortable for a period of time, see what that looks like, and then make different decisions based on the actual evidence that we've received. So I think that would be my what does it take? It takes some open-mindedness and some willingness to say, I'm not used to doing it this way, and I'm not sure the outcome is going to look the same, but let's give it a try. And you test the waters and you pilot it. And I think that's where we've also been very successful, is piloting a number of these programs to say, we're not just going to institute this as 1,000%, NLP and machine learning is the answer. This is, again, giving us directional evidence and guidance to make, better educated projections and decision making.
And faster. And faster.
Faster, cheaper. You go back to my model, but
Yeah.
Well, we had so many great questions today, and I want to thank everyone for attending this Fierce Biotech webinar and submitting those questions. I'd also like to thank our speakers for participating, and H1 and ProPharma for presenting and sponsoring today's webinar. A recorded version of this webinar will be available for you to access again within 24 hours using the same link that was sent to you earlier. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.